Dad, I want Ekranoplan.
Yet, we have a Ekranoplan at home. Besides, what'd you do with the last Ekranoplan I bought you? Oh, that's right. You left it on the beach. Hey everybody, welcome back to Trey's Models. On this episode, we're going to be doing a Takom 1/144 scale Loon Class Ekranoplan. This is the first Takom kit that I built, and I must say the sprues look really nice. Real crisp moldings, everything's super clean. There's absolutely no flash at all. The clear parts are crystal clear with no flaws in them. The gates are a little strangely shaped if you're used to the round type, but the attachment points are real small. Cleanup's not a problem. Everything looks really good at first glance here. I've got high hopes for this. Looks like it's going to be a fun build, so let's dive into it. Okay, with most aircraft builds, this is kind of an aircraft. I'm going to start out in the interior. So I was actually lucky enough to find some interior shots of the actual Ekranoplan and get the colors. They look to be pretty much the Russian blue-green interior colors, so that's what I went with. Not that you're going to see much in this scale from the inside, but you know, as modelers, we all know it's there. It's worth putting it in there, I think. Added some seat belts with some paint and got the back seats painted green. The fronts of the seats look like they're kind of like a leather, so I went ahead and did that. And then went ahead and put in the round portal windows, and those are in sections. But I painted those green as well. I don't know if that's going to add any benefits or not. I highly doubt it, but I'm there. I had the paint out, went ahead and did it anyway. And then the rest of the interior went together really quick. There's not much to it. Then the next step is gluing the fuselage halves together, and everything so far is fitting really nicely. Onto the wings. You could call them wings. I think the back upper fin is kind of like a stabilizer. And the engine pods, the kit is really well engineered. So you have the inlets and the exhaust parts of the engines are captive inside the moldings, and it's pretty simple. It goes together, fits nice. You do have to pay attention cleaning up the sprue gates, because the way Takom molds these, there's a little bit of overhang on the gaps where they glue together, and it's kind of easy to miss. So the best thing I can say is cut, sand, and test fit, and make sure you got them all cleaned up really nice. If you do, they go together really nice. You won't have any issues. I did pre-paint some of the inner engine parts before I assembled them. We'll mask those later as we spray the outside of the aircraft, or ground effect vehicle, which is kind of what it is. But anyway, nothing to get too technical about it. Still having fun with it. Everything's going together really nice, and we're moving on. All right, so we got the interior done. The fuselage halves joined up. Didn't have any fit issues at all with that. We start putting in the ground support, ground effect wings, and the upper stabilizer. Those went together really well. You could actually paint the forward ground effect wing off the aircraft and then put it on later. The fit's that good. The engine pods up front, right behind the cockpit, again, fit is really good. You could paint those separate if you actually wanted to. The one part that you're not going to be able to paint separate is the very back horizontal stabilizer. There is a gap there. I test fit it, sanded it, filed it, played around with it, and I got the gap as close as I could, but it still required a little bit of filler. And that was one of the only spots on the whole kit that needed that. You also have to rescribe a little bit of that detail up there, but again, the quality of the kit's awesome. It's a minor thing, it's not a setback. And the other issue is you got to pay attention to the clear parts and how they join up. There is a little bit of filler required on the front canopy. Also on the front and rear gunners positions, they do require a little test fitting. If you file a little bit off the bottom and the back and keep test fitting, you can get it without adding any filler. But it does require a little bit of patience, a little bit of sanding, but nothing an average modeler can't tackle. But all in all, up to this point, it's been a real pleasant build, and we continue on. Oh, one other note, the rocket pods that go on the top, they are specific for the location, so it gives that detail in the instructions. But what I did was I went ahead and marked them on the bottom so I wouldn't mess that up. But they won't go on in the wrong spots. Just pay attention, they are position specific. Now that we've got everything basically together, gave everything a light gray base just to unify everything, then I came back and hit it with some silver just on the front leading edges and where I wanted some chipping and some weathering. And before that, let me step back just a little bit. Where the canopies were, I sprayed the interior color again. This is something I do on larger scale aircraft. I don't really think this is going to be an issue with something in 1/144 scale, but if you spray the interior color before on the clear parts, before you put the top color on, it gives the illusion from the back side that it has that interior painted look on the frame of the canopy. Again, in this scale, I really don't think it's going to pop that much, but added insurance, why not? So after that, we did the pre-shade, based it with silver, and then again, doing the salt chipping method, coming back with a finer grain of salt because of the scale. You don't want to use coarse salt on something that's 1/144 scale. It's not going to work. Base it with silver, spray it with some water with a little bit of dish soap in it just to break the surface tension. Sprinkle your salt on, get a nice coat on there. You can manipulate it as you like it, make it as thick or as light as you want it. Then come back with your base colors that you're going to paint the actual airframe with. Give that a top coat, let everything dry, brush off the salt, and you'll have a nice chip looking surface underneath. Now you're going to have to come back with these base colors that I'm using because I'm doing a fictional what if color scheme on there. I did tone back the chipping method just a little bit. It was a little too pronounced. But again, this is something you can mess around with. It doesn't have to be an exact science. You're just looking for that effect. And that's the fun part of this. You can play around with it, make it like you want. I mentioned earlier that the canopy didn't fit really great, and I thought I had it squared away. Obviously I didn't. After I had everything based and started progressing forward, I noticed there was some gaps that still didn't look right. I didn't spend enough time on it, so I had to come back and do a correction on it. Sometimes this happens. We all been through it as modelers. The best thing to do is just try to keep the repair as small and as tight as you can. I used Tamiya masking tape. I used a water-based filler. Came back, sanded everything down, leveled it out, let it sit, real patient, and took my time, and then came back and spotted it back in. The effort was worth it. I should have caught this beforehand, but again, it just shows no matter how bad you mess up or how far along you are, you can always come back and fix it. Don't get frustrated. It's repairable. So one thing I forgot to mention on the nose and on the ray domes up at the top where the horizontal stabilizer is, I put a different color, kind of a, I guess it's an off sand desert tan, which to me wanted to represent the fiberglass domes that would have been on there and would have had some weathering on them. I did that before I did the chipping effect as well, along with the silver. I apologize for not mentioning that beforehand, but that was one of the things that I did during the salt chipping method. So following on to that, we get into the artist oils. After I put a dull coat of Tester's enamel on, let that cure off for 24 hours at least. Then I started coming back with some artist oils, and I also used some stencils and kind of broke up the surface with the top colors that I used diluted with just a little bit of white and a little bit of desert tan just to kind of break the colors up. break the monotony of the monochromatic look, kind of give it a little bit more depth, and then came back and hit it with a pin wash. The one cool thing about this kit, there's very little rescribing that you have to do. The biggest part of the rescribing that was involved was right along the engine nacelles up at the front. Very minor. One scrape with the razor saw, done. Everything else fell together really nice. The pin wash popped really good. Everything settled in nicely. So after that, I gave it a final seal, and then it came back with some further weathering that we'll discuss here in a few seconds. On to the weathering. So I used a combination of artist oils and Vallejo streaking and rust grime effects. Very basic. Keep it thin, keep it small, work in small areas, and work your way across. I usually like to start from front to back, keeping the streaking going with the way the airflow would go. Seems to work for me. You work with what works for you. I like this method, and I like the way it pops. And this thing's starting to come together really well. Looking forward to a good finish on this Takom model.
Just go again.
The Caspian Sea Monster, aka the Ekranoplan, was the MD-160 Loon class. Project 903, designed by Rostislav Evgenik Alexiev, born 12/18/1916. It started out with prototypes in the 1960s, culminating in 1966 with the 265-ton Corbel Marquette, otherwise known as the KM. After that, funding was cut and they scaled the design back to a smaller version, the A-90 or Lyamnikov, and only 3 of those were produced. Due to dwindling resources, only one Loon class Ekranoplan was developed. Unfortunately, Rostislav Evgenik Alexiev never got to see his aircraft fly. He died in 1980, February 9th. The Loon class specs are as follows. The speed was 342 miles per hour. The length was 242 feet. Weighed in at 535,700 pounds. Had a range of 1,243 miles. The engine was the Kuznetsov NK-87, and it was armed with 6 P-270 musket anti-ship missiles and 4 23mm cannons, firing from front and aft turret locations. Now, the Ekranoplan originally was designed with the thought of going after the American aircraft carriers. At the time, it would have been able to fly underneath the radar and get close enough with the 100-mile range that the musket anti-shipping missiles had to take out these targets. Unfortunately, the design could not operate in heavy seas and was restricted to calmer waters. which pretty much negated its purpose. After that, the funding dwindled and it faded into obscurity. Only one was completed, and it is languishing on a beach somewhere on its way to become a museum monument, hopefully, if they had the funds to make that happen. Well, thanks for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe, and I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Y'all be good to each other, and we'll see you on the next one.